the fact that the son had been investigated and the father had a gun license, I think that's going to have to be looked at by the Australian authorities quite carefully.
The new head of MI6, Blaise Metrovelli, is making her first public speech in the role today. She's expected to warn that the UK faces a new age of uncertainty as the rules of conflict are being rewritten by Russia and that we're already on the front line against Moscow. So Richard Dearlove is the former head of MI6 and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
Lovely to have you with us. Do you agree with Blaise Metrovelli that we are already on the front line against Moscow?
Absolutely. And some of us have been saying this for a very long time, so I'm pleased to see it being stated clearly and officially by one of my successors.
And what does it look like in reality for those who are on the front line of trying to keep this country secure? I'm thinking of people like Blaise Metrovelli and others who can see this in stark detail, maybe in a way that we just can't. What does it look like?
Well, I mean, what she's doing really is sort of adjusting the threat matrix, because the service is driven by reassessment continuously of the threat. And you're looking around the world, you're looking at the evidence of Russian activity in particular, because at the moment, although, we have a China problem as well, the more aggressive situation is on the European continent. And then, you've got Russian sabotage, you've got Russian attacks on sea cables, you've got all sorts of activity, which is, well, on the verge of, I think, what's now referred to as grey warfare. And I mean, the best means of defense seen from the perspective of MI6 is attack. So we need to be inside the Russian establishment, having a clear picture of what their strategy is, what they're doing, how all of these different events sort of interconnect in terms of Russia making life very, very difficult for many countries in Europe in particular, and of course largely driven in their view by the Ukraine war.
Is it a problem in your view that we even have to really ask this question or discuss this in public? Because it sometimes feels like people have still got to catch up to the seriousness of this situation.
Well, I think it helps that someone who is a professional, as it were, security and intelligence official, is articulating and trying to sort of publicize. I mean, bear in mind, MI6 chiefs giving public speeches is a relatively recent development. I mean, certainly in my whole time as C, as the post is known, I never gave a single public speech. It just wasn't done in that period. And I retired in 2004. I'm not sure my successor gave one either. It's much more recent. I mean, I think there's an attempt by the government, not specifically a Labour government, any government, to be a little more transparent in these areas. And it's a good opportunity to educate the public about the nature of the problem. I mean, you get a much, much bigger audience. I mean, I stood up at a dinner in the city 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, and said, look, we're on the verge of grey warfare with Russia. And, I could look around the room and there's puzzlement on everybody's faces.
And things have certainly shifted. And as you say, largely due to the war in Ukraine, there are talks today. We expect that Ukraine may well go further in detailing its willingness to drop its NATO demands, its demand to join NATO. Is that a wise move in your opinion?
Well, I think the problem, the ideal solution for NATO would be for Ukraine to join. But I think that the problem is that the United States, not specifically Trump, I mean, the Biden administration had much the same view, was that it's a step too far. This is too difficult for Russia to see Ukraine as a NATO member. So the question then is how you accommodate Ukraine as an ally of NATO into the Western Alliance. And of course, it's going to be an essential component in the future because it has such a massive military. I mean, compared to other countries, we're talking about a defense forces in Ukraine of up to nearly 1 million, between 800,000 and 1 million. I mean, it will be the largest army in Europe, and of course, it's important that we understand how it fits in to the strategic arrangements, NATO being a key to that. But they're not going to become members
And as you say, if it is the largest military force in Europe, then there is an advantage to other European nations to having Ukraine tied very closely to the general defence of the region. There is a big question, though, I think, for those here in the UK. I mean, we still haven't seen the defence investment plan. What does that say about this government's commitment to this cause, I suppose?
Well, I think the problem seen from, my point of view anyway, as someone who watches this carefully, is the government have said all the right things about increasing the defence budget and their plans over a period of time. But it's over a period of time. It's too little. It's too little immediately. It needs to be upped as a priority now. I mean, talking to someone like me, I would say that spending on defence now is as important, if not more important, than the National Health Service. Now, that is a very, very difficult political message for any government, particularly a Labour government. But we need to face up to the reality. And, if there's anything wrong with the current situation, we've got all these statements being made about the security situation, the threat from Russia, the problems with China. And we're talking about upping the defence budget by 2035. It's got to be done now. I mean, we've got to start spending now, because to rebuild the military, rebuild the armed forces, strengthen the security and intelligence community, you've got to, as it were, put money in and start quickly, because it takes a long time.
Do you also think we ought to think differently about joining the military, about conscription, I suppose? It's something that other European nations are considering.
Well, I've always been in favour of some sort of conscription. It was on Rishi Sunak's agenda. He did mention it. It amazingly, in my view, unfortunately got almost laughed out of court politically. But I think that we should be doing the same as France and Germany and thinking about conscription. It doesn't have to be, as it were, compulsory. It can start off as a voluntary scheme. But I think the idea of young people spending 18 months, 2 years, they don't have to necessarily go into the military. They can go and work in a care home, and they can be maybe given a choice of options as to the things that would be possible, would be available, would be encouraged by the government. And I think it would do a lot to, as it were, give people a better sense of national identity in a period of crisis. I think it would be a very, very good idea, personally.
There are two other things I just want to ask you about, which are obviously on the agenda this morning. The first is Jimmy Lai. You've mentioned China and the threat of China to this government. What is your response to the result in the Jimmy Lai case and this government's response to it?
Well, I mean, it's amazing what the Chinese have done. I mean, Jimmy Lai is 78. He's been given a life sentence, I think, for acting democratically in Hong Kong. I mean, the Chinese completely violated the joint declaration, which was agreed with them when we handed Hong Kong over. It shows you the true nature of the Chinese Communist state. I mean, it is a savage, autocratic government who are terrified of the virus of democracy being injected backwards from Hong Kong into China, and, as it were, threatening the legitimacy of the communist leadership of China.
And finally, we've been talking about the Bondi attack this morning. We are starting to get more information about the people who were victims of that shooting. We're also starting to get more information about the background of those who are responsible. And there are questions being asked of the security services in Australia. The fact that Naveed Akram, who is in a stable condition in hospital, we understand, he is the son of the other attacker who was killed. He is said to have had previous associations allegedly with the Islamic State group, was investigated but not flagged as a further risk. Are there questions for security services to answer here, do you think?
Well, after these events, there always are. And I think that my sympathies lie with ASIO, the Australian Security Service. They will have a huge number of people on their radar screen, some of whom, have been radicalized, some of whom are active, some who had been active and not active. All security services in democratic countries have limited resources. You have to make choices about who you follow up, who you look at. And I mean, clearly this man had not been recently active, although had been, well, we haven't got the details of he was involved in some sort of ISIS Islamic State cell. But sometimes you're looking at targets, you prioritize the wrong one, you put surveillance on the wrong one. I mean, think about the complexity of following a whole range of different people and finding out what they're doing, what they're up to, what they're planning. I think the thing that's a little shocking for me in this particular case is that his father, who was the other, for me, had arms license and kept significant numbers of weapons. The fact that the son had been investigated and the father had a gun license, I think that's going to have to be looked at by the Australian authorities quite carefully.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Anthony Albanese has also flagged as something that they will need to review. So Richard Dearlove, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you on the programme.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.
That is Sir Richard Dearlove there, the former head of